Where legends breathe again. Eldmyth. She doesn't need claws or fangs. A witch destroys with whispers, symbols, and forbidden knowledge. Feared, hunted, and burned, yet never erased. In this world, magic has a price, and witches always collect it. Deep in the oldest forests, where moonlight struggles to pierce the woven canopy, and in the forgotten valleys where mist clings like a spectral shroud, there exists a presence. It is not a ghost, nor a demon of scripture, but something woven from the very fabric of the wild world's whispered secrets. Its name is uttered rarely, and only in hushed tones around dying fires. The witch. Not the crone of fairy tales with her cauldron and pointed hat, but a creature of profound and ancient lineage, a living myth that dwells in the liminal spaces between the seen and the unseen. To speak of the witch is to speak of the forest's hidden breath, the intelligence in the storm's eye, the sorrow within a mountain's silent vigil. It is a being of immense and terrible beauty, whose form is as shifting as shadow and as permanent as stone. The first sign of its proximity is never a sight, but a sensation, a profound silence that descends, swallowing the chirp of crickets and the rustle of voles in the underbrush. The air grows heavy, charged with a static akin to the moment before lightning strikes, yet laced with the scent of ozone, damp earth, and the faint, sweet decay of autumn leaves. Then a sound may come, not a footfall, but the subtle creak of a branch bending without wind, or a whisper that seems to form from the rustling leaves themselves, forming half-heard words in a language lost to time. This is our entry point into the legend, a step off the known path into a realm where nature itself holds consciousness and watches and waits. The origins of the witch are as tangled and layered as the roots of the world tree from which some cultures claim it sprang. There is no single birthplace for this myth. It is a pancultural echo, a psychic imprint left by humanity's collective encounter with the untamed unknown. In the misty highlands of Caledonia, it was the Cailleach, the Veiled One, a goddess-like entity who shaped the mountains with her staff and commanded the winter winds. Her form was that of a weathered old woman, yet her strength was that of glaciers, and her moods dictated the very fertility of the land. Across the sea, in the deep, dark woods of Germania and Scandinavia, the tales spoke of the Walgist or Skogsra, a forest spirit often breathtakingly beautiful from one side, yet hollow like a rotten tree from the back, who would lead hunters astray, her laughter like the tinkling of ice in a frozen stream. These were not mere sprites, but sovereigns of their domain. In the Carpathian basins, where the woods grew thick and the shadows longer, the figure blurred with that of the Baba Yaga, but in her older primal form. Not a witch in a hut, but the wildness of the forest itself personified, a consuming, amoral force of nature. Early depictions are scarce, for what artist could capture a form that refused to hold still? Petroglyphs show hybrid figures with the antlers of stags and the skirts of mountains. Medieval marginalia and monastic texts sometimes contain startled drawings of leafy faces peering from the borders, as if the parchment itself was being invaded by the wild. The witch, therefore, symbolizes the ultimate, unconquerable spirit of the wilderness. It represents the parts of the world that refuse to be mapped, tamed, or understood, the chaos that exists beyond the firelight, the intelligence that does not think as humans do, but simply is. To live in the shadow of such a being required not conquest, but protocol, a complex tapestry of folklore practices, born of fear, reverence, and a desperate desire for coexistence dictated human interaction with the witch's domains. One did not simply enter an old-growth forest without acknowledgement. It was customary to leave a small offering at a notable tree or moss-covered stone, a crust of bread, a splash of ale, a shiny button, a toll for safe passage. To take from the forest, one had to give. A hunter would whisper a prayer before the kill and leave the heart or the first sip of water from his flask. These were acts of diplomacy with a sovereign power. There were, of course, protections. Iron, the metal of human industry and order, was considered anathema to the witch's ancient, organic magic. Carrying an iron nail in one's pocket or hanging horseshoes above a stable door was thought to create a barrier. Rowan and ash wood were sacred. Crosses made from their twigs and bound with red thread were tied to cattle barns and cradles. But the most potent protection was knowledge, knowing the taboos. Never answer a voice that calls your name from deep within the woods after sundown, for it may not be a human calling. Never follow will-o'-the-wisp lights, no matter how alluring their dance over the peat bogs. And above all, never, ever thank the witch or any creature suspected of being its agent for a kindness. Gratitude implied a settled debt, but interaction with the wild was an ongoing negotiation. A thank you could be interpreted as a closing of the account, leaving one vulnerable to the next, perhaps less benign, interaction. Villagers would tell tales of those who forgot. The woodsman who found a lost axe and shouted his thanks into the silent trees, only to have every tree in his path seem to shift overnight, leaving him hopelessly lost for 3 days and nights, hearing whispers in a language of rustling leaves. One of the most persistent and chilling legends is that of the witch's steed. It is said that on certain nights, when the moon is a mere sliver and the wind carries the smell of distant lightning, the witch would wander to the edges of settlements, to the pastures where horses slept standing. There, it would choose the finest, strongest stallion. With a breath that smelled of cold loam and night-blooming flowers, it would weave a spell over the beast. The horse's eyes, once warm and brown, would gloss over with a milky film, reflecting not the stable but some distant starlit grove. Then the witch would mount, not with saddle or bridle, but seeming to merge with the animal, becoming a single, terrifying entity, centaur-like, but utterly unnatural. This night steed would then ride the borders of the village, its hooves striking sparks from stones but making no sound. Its circuit was a reinforcement of the boundary between the human world and the wild. Those who saw it, a child at a window, a sleepless shepherd, would report a vision of profound dread and awe, a shadow moving faster than the wind, the silhouette of antlers against the clouds, the faint, phosphorescent glow of the steed's eyes and nostrils. Nothing would be harmed. No fences broken, no livestock taken. But by morning, the chosen horse would be back in its pasture, exhausted, coat lathered with a sweat that smelled of frost and pine, and forever after it would startle at shadows, its ears perpetually pricked toward the deep woods, as if listening for a call only it could hear. The horse was never quite the same. It had seen the world from the back of the wild, and a part of its spirit had remained there. Not all encounters were marked by such passive dread. There are tales, older and rarer, that speak of the witch not as a border warden, but as a judge and an executor of natural law. The legend of the greedy logger is one such cautionary myth. It tells of a man named Alaric, who came to a pristine valley with an iron saw and a heart full of ambition. He ignored the offerings left by the dwindling native villagers, scoffed at their warnings about the old one of the glen. He began felling the ancient gargantuan oaks, not for shelter or warmth, but to clear the land for pasture and to sell the priceless timber. He cut and cut, his progress marked by the groans of falling giants. The forest grew silent, then watchful. One evening, as he sharpened his saw by his campfire, he heard a sound like deep, cracking ice. From the line of stumps he had created emerged not a beast, but a slow, tectonic shifting. The earth itself seemed to rise, taking a form of roots, stone, and splintered wood, a golem of its own desecration. It was the witch, but not in its usual form. This was an avatar of the forest's wrath, a manifestation of violated balance. It spoke without a mouth, its voice the crunch of gravel and the sigh of falling leaves. "You take without measure," it intoned. "You create only absence. Now you will serve as a reminder." Alaric fled, but the next morning he was found at the edge of the village, unharmed physically but utterly changed. His skin had taken on the rough, gray texture of bark. His hair was like lichen. His fingers, permanently curled, resembled gnarled twigs. He could not speak, only creak in the wind. He was planted by the villagers at the valley's entrance, where he slowly took root, becoming a twisted, silent testament to the consequence of avarice. The witch had not killed him. It had assimilated him, turning the destroyer into a permanent, suffering part of the very landscape he sought to conquer. Yet the relationship between humanity and the witch was not solely adversarial. In the most ancient and integral myths, the creature served as a guardian of deeper, sacred truths. It was the protector of the world spring, a mythical fount said to exist in the heart of the most impassable mountain range, whose waters held the memory of the earth. This spring was not a source of physical healing, but of understanding. To drink from it, if one could find it and be deemed worthy, was to know the language of stones, the history written in layers of sediment, the slow thoughts of continents. The witch was its eternal warden. The story of Alara, a shaman queen of a forgotten tribe, tells of such a guardianship. Driven by a vision to save her people from a spiritual plague of emptiness, she embarked on a quest to find the spring. For years she searched, following clues in animal migrations and the flow of glaciers. Finally, in a cavern behind a waterfall that fell upward, she found it, a pool of liquid silver, and standing over it, a figure of breathtaking and terrible beauty. The witch in its most elemental form, a being of crystalline water, veined with mineral deposits with eyes like deep wellsprings. It did not attack. It simply asked in a voice that echoed the cave, "What do you seek, knowledge or dominion?" Alara, with pure intent, replied, "Understanding to mend my people's broken connection." The witch studied her, seeing the truth in her heart. It then gestured to the pool, "Drink and remember your duty. You will carry a piece of this truth, and I, a piece of your mortality." Alara drank, and her mind was flooded with the earth's ancient song. When she returned, her people were healed by her renewed wisdom. But from that day, a single strand of her hair turned the color of mountain stream foam, and in the deepest cave, the witch's crystalline form now held a single, slow-beating vein of warm, red blood, a permanent tether to the humanity it had chosen to bless. The duality of the witch is perhaps best encapsulated in the myths surrounding the changing of the seasons. It was not merely a creature of the wild, but the very engine of nature's cycle. In spring, it was said to walk the land in the form of a young maiden wreathed in budding vines, her touch causing flowers to burst from the frozen ground. Her breath was the warm wind that melted the snow. This was the gentle sowing. But as the year waned, so too did its aspect. The maiden's hair would become like autumn leaves, her skin taking on the hue of harvest sunsets, and a melancholy would settle in her step. This was the reaper's complement, gathering the essence of the passing year. Then came winter, and with it, the transformation into the Kaleach, the veiled queen of ice. In this form, the witch was a force of necessary destruction, her staff freezing the lakes, her cloak the blizzard that blanketed the land in sleep. She was feared but also respected, for this death was required for the next spring's rebirth. A famous Scottish tale tells of a foolish young shepherd who mocked the sight of an old woman struggling across a river in late fall. Instead of helping, he jeered. The old woman, the witch in her transitioning guise, fixed him with a gaze that held the coming frost. She struck her staff on the stone of the riverbank. Instantly, the water around him froze, trapping his feet. The air grew bitterly cold. "You laugh at age," she whispered, her voice the sound of cracking ice. "Now feel its stillness." She left him there not to die, but to stand imprisoned in the ice for 3 days and nights, forced to witness the land's rapid shift into winter, feeling the slow, creeping cold seep into his very bones. When the thaw finally came, he was freed, a profoundly changed man. He never mocked the elderly again, and he developed a deep, reverent understanding of the harsh, beautiful necessity of each season, having stared into the eyes of the force that commanded them. With the rise of iron cities and the slow retreat of the primordial wild, the nature of encounters with the witch began to change. It became less a daily sovereign and more a creature of the margins, of the last untouched places. The legend of the Last Bridge tells of this transition. A sprawling city planned to build a road through an ancient marsh, the last wetland in the region. The final step was a bridge. Every time pilings were driven, they would be found shattered by morning. Tools went missing. Surveyors reported seeing will-o'-the-wisps forming angry, swirling patterns. The foreman, a pragmatic man of steel and concrete, dismissed the workers' fears as superstition. He decided to stand guard himself. That night under a gibbous moon, he saw her. Not a monster, but a sorrowful figure standing knee-deep in the murky water, her form made of cattails, silt, and the reflections of dead stars. "This is the last breathing place," she said, her voice bubbling up from the water. "The last filter. Cross this line with your stone and poison, and you cross into a world that has forgotten how to breathe." The foreman, for the first time, felt not fear but a crushing shame. He saw not a hindrance to progress, but the final plea of a dying ecosystem. He refused to continue the project. The bridge was never built. The road was rerouted at great cost. The marsh remains to this day, a small, preserved relic. Those who know the story call it witch's bargain. The creature did not threaten or curse. It simply showed the consequence, and in one man's heart it found a sliver of the old reverence, enough to secure a sanctuary. This story marks the witch's evolution from a physical ruler to a symbolic one, a guardian of ecological balance, a voice for the places humanity has forgotten how to value. In the modern imagination, the witch has undergone a profound metamorphosis, escaping the pages of folklore to thrive in new realms. It is a muse for artists, who paint it not as a horror, but as a tragic, majestic embodiment of a vanishing world. Environmental art installations feature towering sculptures of woven branches and recycled materials, titled The Last Guardian, invoking its spirit. In fantasy literature and film, it has been reinterpreted as the ancient Dryad Queen, the wise but dangerous Entwife, or the enigmatic Green Knight, archetypes that carry its core traits of immense power, deep connection to place, and moral ambiguity. Video games cast it as a boss to be understood rather than slain, or as a mysterious NPC offering cryptic quests that restore balance to a corrupted forest. Its symbolism has evolved from pure terror to more complex fascination. It no longer represents just the fear of the dark woods, but our collective anxiety over climate change and ecological loss, the vengeful spirit of a planet pushed to the brink. It also symbolizes a deep, nostalgic yearning for a connection to the wild that our industrialized world has severed. We project onto it our hopes for a natural world that can fight back, judge, and protect itself. In some remote corners of the globe, the old-growth forests of Romania, the highlands of Papua New Guinea, the remote fjords of Norway, there are still those who leave offerings. Not out of fear of being led astray, but out of a cultural memory, a respect for the story, and perhaps a silent hope that by acknowledging the myth, they are helping to preserve the reality it represents. So what in the end is the witch? It is not a single creature, but a narrative constellation, a pattern we have perceived in the chaos of nature. It is the face we give to the autonomous will of the wild, a will that is neither good nor evil, but profoundly other. It is the storm that destroys a crop but ends a drought. It is the predator that culls the herd, ensuring its health. It is the deep, silent intelligence of an ecosystem that operates on a timescale we can barely comprehend. The witch represents the parts of ourselves we have buried under concrete and routine. Our instinctual fear, our primal awe, our capacity to listen to a language older than words. Its enduring power in our stories is a testament to a truth we cannot quite shake, that the world is alive in ways we have forgotten how to see. The forests may be smaller, the nights brighter with artificial light, but the fundamental mystery remains. Perhaps the witch is not hiding because it is afraid of us, but because we have forgotten how to look. It waits in the last wild places, in the quiet moments between heartbeats, in the stories we tell our children about the world outside the window. It is the memory of nature's sovereignty. And as long as we feel a shiver when an unexpected fog rolls in, or pause to listen to the strange silence that sometimes falls in the woods, or wonder at the gnarled, face-like pattern in the bark of an ancient tree, the witch is still there, watching, remembering, and in its own inscrutable way, keeping the old pact between humanity and the wild, waiting to see if we will once again learn its terms. Another legend fades, but the next awaits. Like this video, subscribe and continue the journey through myths.